r/ProRevenge. First story. Landlord is jealous of my income, raises my rent $500. I screw him years later for $20k. TLDR is the same as the title. Landlord is jealous of my income, raises my rent 50%. I screw him years later for $20k. All names have been changed. In the late '90s, wife and I were just married, just getting started, and we decided to dink, double income, no kids it for a few years, to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising, and I was a newly minted software developer. I had an entry-level job for a while, and then got recruited to a new city and a new job that paid 3x what I was making before. It was an offer too good to pass up. I ran the numbers, and it was a no-brainer. By living frugally and saving my entire salary, living off just her income, we would easily have enough in a year to put 20% down payment on a new house. We rented an apartment in the new city that was listed for $950 MO. The landlord was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. Let's call him Hank Wazowski. Hank was a thin gray no-nonsense guy. He was pleasant enough, but perfunctory, dry, and had no sense of humor. He made a point of explaining that under no circumstances was he responsible for maintaining the garbage disposal, and that it was not included in the rental agreement and he would not be responsible for fixing it were it to break. Okay. He seemed slightly amused by us, a clueless young newlywed couple, but I could tell he wanted to rent to us, because we were very obviously a safe choice as renters. We filled out the rental agreement and the credit check, and this is where my troubles began. Hank looked hard at the credit application where I listed my job title, software developer, and my income, $75k. For a 23-year-old in his second year out of college, in the late 1990s, this is a small fortune. Throw in my wife's salary, and we were over 6 figures in income, renting an apartment far beneath our means. Like I said, dink is the way to go when starting out. I can't believe how much money you make. Hank must have said half a dozen times, muttering under his breath. I explained we were saving to buy a house, and that we were only going to stay in the apartment a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would month to month be okay after a year? Hank assured us that would be fine. We saw Hank only once during the year and he again mentioned my salary and how he couldn't believe that's what software developers were making. It was awkward and I gave a vague reply. Anyway, a year later we had found a house to buy, signed all the papers, and were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after our rental lease was up, so I called Hank to ask if we could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured me on the phone it would be no problem and he would send over an extension for us to sign. The extension arrived in the mail, and it included a month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent. I flipped out and called him. Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's too much. That's more than my new mortgage is going to be. He was super condescending to me. Rocky Moose, it's what the apartment goes for now. I would be losing money by renting it for less. I tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew we could afford the $500, had no choice in the matter, and he was going to screw us over as best he could. He got angry with me for arguing my point, and I'll never forget his parting words. You don't have to like it, Rocky Moose, you just have to pay it. My wife and I tried to figure out a way to move out early by putting our furniture in storage for a couple months and crashing with friends, but it just wasn't going to work out. I swallowed my pride and wrote out the check for $1,450 for the extra month. A month later I wrote a similar check, and then we moved out. I made sure the apartment was spotless before moving, but still Hank withheld $300 from our security deposit for bullshit things that were just a way for him to squeeze a few more dollars from the kids, who made too much money. $100 for cleaning, sure, but $300 was obscene. In my mind, he had screwed me over for $1,200 and there was nothing I could do about it. What made us even more infuriating is that I saw the ad Hank put in the paper after we moved out, and he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than we had been paying originally, not the grossly inflated $500 increase. and it didn't rent. A month later I saw the same ad, and he had lowered the price to $75 more than we had been paying, and I assume it got rented since the ad stopped appearing. Fast forward about 5 years. Life is good, the house is good, we have a baby, and even though the dot-com bubble has burst, I'm still employed. One day, out of the blue, I overhear one of my co-workers, Phil, a senior developer, talking to the guy working the reception desk. "Hey, Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Wazowski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out." I freeze and get a taste of bile in my mouth remembering how I had to write out that name on those checks all those years ago. There's no way it's the same guy, right? I walk over to Phil who is still by the reception desk. "Phil," I say, "how do you know that name, Hank Wazowski?" Phil explains that Hank is his real estate agent. "I bought my condo through him several years ago. I'm selling my condo now, so I can buy a house. So I'm going to ask him to be my agent again." "Do you know him?" I tell Phil that I used to rent an apartment from Hank and described what he looks like. Phil confirms the description. It's the same guy. Wow, small world, right? And on cue, right then the front door to the office opens, and in walks Hank Wazowski. I stare in disbelief. He's carrying a folder of papers and doesn't recognize me. Phil and Hank shake hands and they talk for a few moments. I stand there silently, wondering what to do. Phil finally says, "Hank, this is my friend Rocky Moose. I think you may have already met." "Yes, hello Hank. Good to see you again. My wife and I were your tenants a few years ago on Street. Remember, the software developer who rented for a year saving to buy a house? Well, this is where I work. Here, with Phil." Hank's eyes indicate he now remembers me, and he's starting to put it all together. We shake hands and he says yes, of course he remembers, and asks how we are doing. "Oh, we are just fine. Thanks for asking." Phil says that you're his real estate agent. Small world, isn't it? Hank nods pleasantly. He still doesn't remember the details of our last conversation. I do some quick math in my head. This is the early/mid 2000s. The real estate market is very strong and easy money for any agent. The crash of 2008 is still a few years in the future. I start to think out loud. Selling the condo for around $150 to $200,000, and you're looking at houses in the $500,000 range, so that's $650 to $700,000 in total transactions. An agent getting 3% on the sale and a purchase is getting around $20K for his trouble. That's a good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash, and I can tell he remembers everything about me now. Phil is surprised at my passive-aggressive tone. I'm enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Hank deflects my question, saying it's complicated, and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as possible. He shakes hands with Phil, looks at me, nods, and goes to leave. "It was really good to see you again, Hank." I call behind him. He exits the building. As the door is still shutting, I say a bit too loudly so that Hank can hear, "Phil, don't sign anything just yet. I have a story to tell you." Phil looks at me and says, "Rocky, what the hell was that all about?" He looks pissed and confused at my behavior. I tell Phil the whole story. The rent, the $500 increase, the security deposit. You don't have to like it. You just have to pay it. Everything. "Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo and buy a house. I hate him. He's evil. I'll help you find another real estate agent. Just use anyone but Hank." So the great thing about Phil is that, well, he's a great guy. He says he's a little surprised at my story and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy. "But I totally see him doing that to you," he admits. "There's no way I could use him now." What a dick. Then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. "What do you want me to say when I fire him?" I have special feelings for Phil now. We came up with a plan, and I made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's repertoire. We planned it all out together in advance. My only regret is that I didn't get to see Hank's reaction in person a day later when Phil made the following phone call while I stood behind him listening. "Hi, Hank. It's Phil calling. Yeah, about that. I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not going to sign up with you." Pause. No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'd be losing money if you did that. Pause. No, this is just a decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with Rocky Moose. Pause. Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye. Click. And it was the greatest revenge I could have ever imagined. Through a chance meeting years later, Hank got screwed out of $20,000 in easy commissions. And the best part is Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky Moose. Second story. A woman let her dog shit on the airport floor. So I shit on her plans. While walking to my gate at LAX, I noticed a woman whose dog was in the middle of doing its business. The woman was loudly FaceTiming with her back to the dog, so I assumed she didn't notice. That was likely the thought shared by the gentleman who tried to get her attention. "Excuse me, miss," he said, in a polite tone. The woman glared at him. "Your dog," he sheepishly continued, pointing to the mid-poop pup. The woman rolled her eyes and went back to FaceTime as the man slinked away, seemingly embarrassed. "Some people," she bellowed to her FaceTime companion with no hint of irony, "are just so damned rude." When her dog finished, the woman started walking away, leaving everything right on the airport floor. Another woman tried to stop her. "You're not going to clean that up?" she asked, as shocked as the rest of us were. "They have people for that," the offender replied, disappearing into the crowd, as much as someone yelling into their phone can disappear into a crowd. I stood near the pile and warned people to walk around it while someone else got a maintenance worker's attention. No one said anything. We were so shocked that anyone could be that horrible. When I got to my gate, the woman was there too. Great, we were both going to Tokyo. When I travel abroad, I get embarrassed by other Americans doing things 100 times less embarrassing than leaving animal feces on the floor of an airport. To make it worse, her dog was now barking at everyone who walked by. I have nothing against people flying with their dogs, I do it often. But it is a privilege I take seriously. My dog is well trained and behaves better than most people. He certainly behaves better than that arsehole. Speaking of arseholes, there is a pet relief area inside LAX, past security, just 2 gates away from where the party pooper let her dog go to town. It didn't matter, she was the type of person to litter 3 feet from an empty garbage can. While her dog barked at the world, the woman had moved from FaceTiming with no headphones to listening to music with no headphones. I don't like to throw around the word sociopath, but I don't know how else I could explain just how selfish and terrible of a person she was. I'd bet her car was somewhere in long-term parking, parked across 3 spots with paint on the bumper from the child's bike she hit without leaving a note. Everyone else tried to ignore her, sitting as far away from her as they could. I'm not everyone else. I sat down right next to the horrible woman. "Are you going to London on business?" I said. "I'm going to Tokyo," she responded gruffly, annoyed that I interrupted her jing. "Oh," I said. "Then you better hurry. That flight got moved to gate 53C. This is the flight to London." I figured I could give her a little moment of panic as payback for how terribly she was treating everyone. I didn't predict what would happen next. She grabbed her bags and her dog in a huff and stormed out of the gate without even checking. She was so self-involved, she didn't notice that the monitor at our gate still said Tokyo and almost everyone at the gate was Japanese. Based on her actions, she believed me that the fight had been moved, so she's also an asshole for not thanking me. Some people, I thought as I watched her rush away from the gate without stopping her, are just so damned rude. The flight to Tokyo was at gate 69A, so the 53 gates were on the other side of the next terminal. And I felt guilty knowing she probably berated some poor clerk who had to explain to her that there was no gate 53C. I don't know if she made it back to this flight before we took off or not, but I didn't see her board and I don't hear her dog. Her missing her flight was not my original intention, but it would be a fine punishment for her being so rude to everyone and making a low-paid stranger clean feces off the floor. What makes me wonder if I went too far is the knowledge that Delta only has 1 flight to Tokyo each day. Whoops. Maybe she can rebook on another airline. I hear they have people for that. Edit. For those of you who want to play internet detective and demanded to see my ticket, as if that even proves anything, I'm a stand-up comedian with a show in LA last night and a show in Tokyo tonight. But if that's not enough for you, here's my ticket. And yes, Delta does allow dogs on flights to Japan. Edit 2. RIP inbox in a ridiculous 1000 message way. Thanks to all the nice folks, especially the people who are coming to shows, etc. I'm trying to get to all your comments, but it may take me a few days. For those who are being dicks, I hope you wheel your suitcase into her dog shit.